months and possibly years ahead. And when it comes to the legislation and decision-making, whether or not this coalition can hold together...
Who do you think's given up most in getting this marriage going?
Well, I think actually in many respects they both are giving up a lot. From the mood music that I'm hearing from their backbenchers in the House of Commons, I think both sides, in terms of their parliamentary family, feel aggrieved at how much the other is giving up. But I have to say, at the moment, until Parliament gets up and running, as of the Queen's speech next week, we'll really begin to see whether this coalition can hang together.
Ming Campbell, you might have been leader of the Liberal Democrats at this election, and Nick Clegg happened to be. You were the one before. Would you have done this deal?
I don't think I would have had the kind of impact that Nick Clegg had in the debates, which changed the whole terms of trade of the general election in a quite extraordinary way, wholly unpredicted by anyone that he should make such an impact. And he talked about the new politics. And for all my immodesty about my own strengths, I'm not sure I'm a representative of the new politics much. And I don't accept...
So you don't really go along with the new politics, you mean? You're not really happy with the new politics?
No. Look, Nick Clegg was the leader for 2010, and he's proved that by taking the Liberals, or Liberal Democrats, into government for the first time for a very, very long time. Now, what were the alternatives? The alternatives were to say, no, we won't have any arrangement with the Conservatives, they can form a minority government. We would have had a second election within 6 months, because the Palace would have undoubtedly granted a dissolution if David Cameron had gone to the Queen and said, I cannot govern, I need a fresh mandate. The other alternative was something called confidence and supply, in which you don't vote them down on a motion of confidence, but you let them have their budget, thereby allowing them to carry through their programme, with which I have had quite fundamental disagreements. Again, there would have been a fresh election in 6 months. What were the public crying out for all the way through the general election? Stability. And therefore, if you were interested in stability, there had to be an arrangement between the Liberal Democrats and one of the other parties. And I can tell you from my own personal experience that the Labour Party, for a variety of reasons, some entirely legitimate, some as a result of the shock of losing office after 13 years, simply weren't up for it. And therefore the choice was, is it a full-blown coalition with the Conservatives or nothing? And the decision, in the national interest, was that it should be a full-blown coalition. And part of that, if you like, is represented in the contents of this document, one, of course, of which I suspect may be of great interest to the people of this constituency, and that is the fact that there's to be no third runway at Heathrow.
Yes, well, that's a pretty cheap shot to end with, but so unlike Charles Kennedy, you go for this, and had you been leader, you would have gone for it. You're 100% behind it.
I voted for it. I had reservations. Why? Because throughout my political life, the argument in our party has been that the realignment would come from the left. That's why people like Roy Jenkins and David Owen left the Labour Party and formed the SDP. It's what Joe Grimond talked about, what David Steele, Paddy Ashdown with Tony Blair. It was all about realignment from the left.
Right.
That was not feasible. It wasn't possible. The national interest pointed in another direction.
The national interest. The man in the second row there, you say.
Can Caroline confirm that if Labour had been given the opportunity to form a coalition with the Lib Dems, they would have made no concessions whatsoever?
Well, first of all, I didn't believe in us making a coalition with the Lib Dems. I think we lost the election, and I think we had to accept that, to be honest. And I really didn't like this sort of grubby speed dating that was going on the other week. So that's my view on it. I mean, looking through the coalition document, as I said, you can see some things that have been dropped, some things that have been kept in, but there's a lot of stuff that's been pushed out to commissions. So I think it's, you know, as I say, there may be policies that come forward that actually, you know, I'm not going to say at this stage that I won't support, because I think that would be ridiculously immature. But the fact is, I don't think this coalition is all new and shiny as people think. I think it's about power, and the Liberal Democrats wanted power and they grabbed it.
All right. Douglas Murray, the question is, do you think that the two parties have betrayed their core supporters and are happier with each other than with those parties?
Well, they're obviously very happy with each other. Their appearances so far have suggested that, and I think that voters for both parties are going to feel very let down by this. This is not what they voted for. And let me just give you an example. Let me give you one quick example. This programme, it's nice to have two representatives of the governing coalition on this week. But what happens in the future on a programme like this? Will those voters who voted Conservative at this election be happy when their representative is Simon Hughes of the Lib Dems, for instance? Or will the Liberal Democrats be happy when their man up on the panel is Michael Howard? I'm not sure they will be. I'm not sure that anyone's very happy about this. Now, admittedly, this is the best of a bad job. But, and I think, like most of the country, we wish this coalition well. But the number of compromises that are going to be happening along the way, the number of things that have already been, as Caroline says, shunted off to commissions, almost every single major issue has been shunted off into a commission.
Hang on a second. Ming Campbell said this was done in the national... We'll come to that. Ming Campbell said this was in the national interest. Are you saying you endorse it, you wish it well because it is in the national interest, or do you think it's not in the national interest?
Well, look, I mean, I wish it well because they're a government who've just come in and I hope they do a good job of it, like anyone else does. But there are a lot of people in this country... There are a lot of people in this country, like myself, who believe now that they're effectively not represented. Most Conservative voters in this country are not represented. Most Conservative voters in this country don't feel they have any, as far as I can see, profit from the Clegg alliance. And now, the worst thing about this, if I may say so, is the following, is that the political parties spend the whole election talking about minute differences between themselves, actually sort of technical differences, but they make them huge. And then they come into government like this and they say, actually, this was what we wanted all along. We forgot. This was actually the ideal. Well, in which case, why didn't you admit during the campaign there wasn't much that you were arguing about?
Theresa May.
I'm afraid what Douglas has just said is a gross misrepresentation of the situation that we have with the coalition government. Let's just go back to that election result. Caroline's right. Labour lost the election. People quite like the look of the Conservatives, but they didn't actually want to give us that outright majority. And I think what we have done, the Liberal Democrat and Conservative parties, in putting together this coalition, is actually we've listened to the people of this country, we've listened to the message that the voters gave us, and we've put together what we believe, and what I firmly believe, will provide stable and strong government for this country. And with a fixed-term parliament, I think we have entered a new era of politics in this country. And yes, it is difficult for some people to adjust to it, and yes, some compromises do have to be made. But I think we're actually at an exciting time in British politics where we're taking a whole different approach to how we govern this country, and we're saying what matters, what we think people want, is stable government for 5 years. And what you have in this programme, yes, there are some compromises, of course there are, when two parties are working together.
Look at the compromises in the Labour government in the course of the last 13 years. Gordon Brown and Tony Blair are at each other's throats for most of those 13 years.
Honestly, there's a complete difference between two parties with completely different manifestos coming together and cobbling together in the matter of a week.
Well, and two people fighting like ferrets in a sack for 13 years.
No, actually, on the policy issues, actually, that was come to agreement in a democratic way within our party, actually. This is the difference. We've had, manifestos put out there in the general election, and what's the document today, whilst does reflect those manifestos in different ways, in other ways it doesn't at all.
Theresa May, what about what the right-wing press, the Mail, the Sun, you appear to have lost their support over this Human Rights Act? You came in saying you were going to abolish it and choose a British Human Rights Act, and now you say you're not going to because of the... Isn't that an example of something where you radically changed the position that people that supported you wanted to see carried out?
We said during the general election that we would introduce a British Bill of Rights. In this document, you do have, I admit, it's one of the commissions that is in this document, one of the few commissions in this document, but what we say is we will set up a commission to look at establishing a British Bill of Rights. And we then go on within this document to point out that we do want to ensure that we're maintaining and standing by our human rights requirements, but also that we need to ensure that we do have the responsibilities. Somebody said earlier, in relation to the first question, about with rights come responsibilities. That's absolutely correct.
But with coalitions come commissions.
Well, David, through this document, what you will see is page after page of agreement on decisions that we have taken that have been... I mean, many people, across in Europe, in mainland Europe, where they're used to coalition governments, it often takes weeks, maybe months, to actually bring those together. A lot of work has gone into this, and what you see in here is Narinda's original question was about, have the core supporters been sold out? No, they have not. The three words that underpin this document are freedom, fairness and responsibility. And freedom, fairness and responsibility have always underpinned what the Conservative Party believes in.
The man up there.